Welcome back to the Blazor Server in-depth course. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at error handling inside Blazor and how that works, both unexpected exceptions or expected exceptions, but also bad routes. Well, if you go to a page that's not there, what happens? Okay, so let's go to Visual Studio. We'll create a new project, create a Blazor app, and we'll call this just Blazor app, and the solution name we'll call Error Handling Demo. Hit Create. Again, it's going to do the same thing. .NET Core 3.1 app server or server app HTTPS. Hit Create. And now we have our project. We can close out of this default page. Now let's see if we can break this. So we're going to go to Pages. I'm going to go to Counter. And in the increment count, I'm going to say throw new exception. I just broke this. All right. And so now that exception will be thrown whenever you push the button and increment the count. Now, this is just C# code, so it works just the same as anywhere else in C#. If it throws an exception, it's going to stop the application from running, which has different implications because we're running a Blazor app. Remember, Blazor has a connection between the server and the client via the Signal R connection. And so that connection is normally open. But when you crash the application, what's going to happen is it's actually going to break that connection. So we'll see that in just a minute. Now, I also mentioned that we also can deal with regular exceptions or exceptions we handle. And that's because this is just C# code. I could wrap this line in a try-catch. And I could say, hey, if you get an exception, which of course you always will, then do this. So we don't have to have unhandled exceptions. But if we do, what happens? So let's run this application. I'll change over to Kestrel. Again, just my preference here. And I hit run. Kestrel opens up. And now we have our application running. There's a couple of different exceptions I want to show. First of all, let's go to the demo page, which there isn't one. So let's go to /demo. And we get this message right here. It says, sorry, there's nothing at this address. Now, if we go back over, I'm not going to close it out just yet. Go back over here to our code. Where does that message come from? Well, if we look at the app.razor, remember this is the what happens when we're routing. So if we find the route, then route to that page and use the default layout of main layout. But if you don't find that page, then do this. Create our own new layout using the main layout as the default or the background layout, and then put on top of it in the body section, sorry, there's nothing at this address. That's where that error message comes in. So that's what we're seeing right here. Now that's not particularly spectacular. In fact, that's definitely not something I would encourage you to keep in your application looking like that. You definitely want to add some more stuff around it. So some sites have gone to a full page that says, hey, you've got here by accident, or whoops, we have a problem. Hey, you want to report this? Or here's how you can go to other pages you might be looking for. And so there's a lot more you can do with this page, and we'll look at how to do that in just a minute. But first, I want to show you the other way to break your application. And that is going to this counter right here. And we're going to hit Click Me. Now, since we're running in Visual Studio, it's going to pause. Watch. See, it pauses and it hits right here at this exception. We can debug it and all the rest. If, however, we hit Continue, this is what the user sees. An unhandled exception has occurred. See Browser Dev Tools for details. And then a reload. Because we've broken the connection to our Signal R, to our server. Let's hit F12 to look at those Browser Dev Tools. So F12 brings up the Browser Dev Tools. And here I'm in the Console tab. And you can see right here, System Exception, I just broke this. That was my message. At blazorapp.pages.counter.increment_count in, and there's the location to counter.razor line 14. So we can use that to go right to that location even if we weren't in debug mode, which we are. But this may raise a question for you, or it should. And that question is, we don't want to show us the user, why is this showing all this information, all this possibly secret information to the user? And the answer is, it's not. So let me prove that to you, or let me show you how it's showing up the dev information. If we close this out, if we go back over, remember under properties, we go to debug for Blazor, which is our Kestrel application, we have this environment variable called development. Let's look at that a little bit larger. You can go right to the launch settings.json. And there it is right there. The environmental variable or environment variable called ASP.core_environment, and it's set to development. So when this is set to development, what happens is Visual Studio says, okay, you're in development mode. I'm going to show you all the development messages that make it easier for you to debug your application, make it easier to figure out what's going on and why. However, this environmental variable is not one you want to set in production, which by default, if you publish this, it will not be set for production. This is just development information. Remember these profiles right here? They are just for development purposes. They're not for production use, just for when you hit the play button or the run button in Visual Studio. That's what they're there for. So these are both set to have development environments set to development. Now, if you change this to something else or remove it, then Visual Studio will not show that development page. It'll show a different one, or that development message. So by default, the environment is production. It's only if you add this that it becomes development, and that's safety. Because if you don't configure your server, you don't want it showing sensitive information. So by default, it's safe. So we can take this out, or we can change this to production. Either way. Now if we run this, and I'm going to run it, I'm going to do a run without, or start without debugging. What this is going to do is, when we get the exception, it's not going to break in Visual Studio, because Visual Studio is not listening for the exceptions. That will give us a better experience like what the user would see. So start without debugging. So it still launches Kestrel, still launches our application. It's just that now it's in a mode that's not connected, which means when I hit counter and hit click me, I just get this message to the bottom that says an error has occurred. The application may no longer respond until reloaded. Click here to reload, or the reload button. Let's hit F12 and look at our error message. Notice there still is an exception here. It's still red. And it says an unhandled exception in the current circuit, so this circuit will be terminated. For more details, turn on detailed exceptions by setting detail errors to true in appsettings.development.json or circuit operations or options.detail errors. Well, actually, we don't even need to do that. We just need to set the mode to development. But that exception message doesn't tell the user where in the source code it was, what the exception was, what the path is to our source code, none of that. It just says, hey, there's an error, and that probably disconnected or terminated the circuit, which is that signal R connection. The good news is that if we hit reload, it will reconnect, and now we can still fetch data and everything else. But if we did not, we go to fetch data, nothing happens. Notice the URL now says fetch data, but we're not in the fetch data page because that signal R connection has been broken. It would take a reload to allow us to go to that page. Okay, so those are the two basic types of exceptions. Also notice the fail right there. That's kind of cool. We see the exception right in Kestrel. So those are the two types of exceptions you'll most likely see. The unhandled exception, something radically broke, like we have right here, and also the I went to the wrong page. So let's talk about how to deal with these. First of all, let's deal with the easy one, which is exceptions. So if you throw an exception, first of all, try and catch your exceptions. If you know something might give an exception, maybe just catch that connection and say, hey, we can't do that because we're missing the file or whatever the case may be. But you still will have some unhandled exceptions, possibly. So you still want to have this stuff taken care of or protected against. So besides handling exceptions properly, the only other thing you really need to think through is what type of messaging do you want to give to your users when there is an exception. Remember that bar at the bottom before it says reload? That message. Where does that come from? Well, that comes from host.cshtml. If we look down here under Blazor Error UI, this gets triggered or shown anytime Blazor has an exception, an unhandled exception. And so this right here says, hey, if it's staging or production, then show this error message. If it's development, then show this message. Okay, so this, we might say, you know what, an error has occurred, may no respond to reload. That may be clear, or it may be that we want to change it, like something went wrong, click here to reload, or let the IT department know, or something like that. We could change it to whatever message you want it to be. Let's just change it just so, something broke. Click reload to try again. Okay? So that's the exception we'll see in staging and production. So now let's run this again and just see that message, make sure that it works like we intend it to. So counter, click me, something broke, click reload to try again. And again, reload, now works. So goes back, we get that message again. They can dismiss that message if they want to, but the site is now broken until they actually hit the reload button, and then it will work just fine. So that allows you to change that message. The message for your developers, which is in development environment, that's probably fine. So if you want to be a little more clear, you could say, hey, hit F12 to see what the exception was. That might be a possibility. But that's just for your internal development use. You wouldn't show that to end users. So that's how to deal with exceptions. Now let's deal with what happens if the route does not exist. So we have a /demo, and it gave this weird error message, which if we go to app.razor, this was the message that it gave. Now we can change this to be anything you want. Right now it's just one piece of text. Maybe you want to have a little bit more HTML, so H1 So, something broke. And then just say something like, it looks like we lost this page. Can you let us know? And then maybe put a link in there to click to let us know or something of that nature. But now it just does a little bit of changes. If I run this again, let's wait for it to launch here. And if I go to /demo now, something broke. Looks like you lost this page. Can you let us know? And you can put, a picture in the background. You can change the whole layout if you want. Basically, anything inside of this layout view will get displayed like any other page would get displayed. So this code in here, or this HTML markup, is the same as what you'd have in, say, Counter or anywhere else. You can put whatever you want there. Now, we will cover pages and components later, but just note this is a place where you might want to use a component or a full page. For example, we could pass in a component like error. Okay, Blazor app.pages.error, which you gotta have the full name for it in this particular location. But what that will do is it will pass in this kind of old school error page. This isn't one we typically use much anymore, but it is there. And so you could redo this if you want, or you could create your own. But then we call it using just this tag. And then what happens is if we run this, we'll get that full error page in the place of whatever we had before. So /demo goes to this exception page, all right, which is a more common way you see in MVC or Razor pages as an exception page. So we can do a full page there. We can have multiple pages here. We can build this whole thing up. So these components are stackable, so you can put multiple. We can even inject a custom message here if you wanted to, or whatever you want to do, but this is your place to make modifications for those missing pages. Just for a little bit of inspiration, if we were to go to github.com, github.com/ and then I start typing in, let's keep it inside the alphabet, bad characters. We're going to get their error page. And notice that it's a 404 page. It says, hey, the web page is, this is not the web page you're looking for. And it has a little icon, which actually, or image, which is a parallax effect, which moves around a little bit. And it does give you links to other locations. You can search whatever you need to do. So this might be an inspiration for what you want to do on your own error page. So that you'd put right in here. So you can create your own page and then reference it here, or you can just type in HTML right here and even the Razor syntax and use it directly. It's up to you. I would encourage you, if you're going to do a lot of syntax here, a lot of HTML, make it its own page and then just reference it like this. Keeps it a little cleaner. All right, so that is it for this lesson. We covered how to deal with exceptions, how they're shown both in development mode as well as production mode. So we changed it to production. I'll change it back to development. And we talked about what to do with your missing pages and how to modify this section right here so that you have more detailed information or a way to tell the user what to do now that the page is missing. And we talked about how to put just HTML in here, or you could reference a full page or even multiple pages using the component syntax, which again we'll cover in a later video, but this allows you to compose a page right here if you want to. Okay? So that's it for this lesson. It's time to practice what you've learned. Try out a few of those. Try out a page that's not there and also an exception. See what happens. See what you can do, how to make it yours, make it work right, and really customize it to fit what your environment might be. And that way you get comfortable with the different places to look for these different pieces, whether it's app.razor or it's host.cshtml or wherever.